They handed her to me across the water like a debt being paid, and I remember thinking she would not last a winter in my hall. The ford ran low that morning, the sundered river sliding gray and cold between the two banks it had kept apart for 100 years. On my side stood Iron Hello, my warriors in dark iron, my banners hanging heavy with river damp, my wolves packing the shale with their hackles half raised because they could smell the enemy on the far shore. On that far shore stood Thornmere, the pack we had bled against since my grandfather's grandfather wore the crown. And between us, in the shallow race of the ford, walked a woman in a plain gray cloak, her boots soaked to the ankle, carrying nothing at all. That was the price of the peace. One woman given by their alpha to their enemy so that the killing might stop. She walks like she's going to a hanging, Havard murmured at my shoulder. He was my warlord, my father's before me, a broad, grizzled wolf with a voice like oil poured slow. Fitting. That's near enough what it is. I said nothing. I watched her come. She did not look at the water. She looked at me straight across the ford, straight up the bank to where I stood with the crown of gray iron on my brow and 100 years of hate behind me. And she did not flinch, and she did not weep, and she did not bow her head the way a hostage is meant to bow. She simply held my eyes and kept walking, cold river to her shins, until she reached the stone at the middle of the ford where their land ended and mine began. And there she stopped, 1 foot in each pack's water, and the wind turned. It came off the far bank and crossed the river and reached me, and it carried her scent up into the cold morning air, and something in me that had been at war my whole life, some drum I had heard behind my own ribs since the day I was whelped, missed a single beat and went quiet. I did not understand it. I did not want to understand it. I had buried 3 brothers and a father in this war. I had no room in my chest for anything a stranger's scent could put there. But my wolf, who had never once been still in 100 border skirmishes, went as still as a held breath, and I stood on my own bank like a boy who had forgotten his own name. "My lord," Havard said, quieter now, watching me, "the right." I made my face iron again. I came down the bank to the water's edge, and she took the last steps across the ford to stand before me on my land, and I saw that she was younger than I'd braced for and steadier than she had any right to be. River cold, cloak soaked, alone among 400 enemies, and her hands did not shake. "I am Varric," I said, "Alpha King of Iron Hello. You stand on my ground now." "I know whose ground I stand on," she said. Her voice was low and even. "I have looked at it across this river my whole life. It is not so different from ours." Behind me, a low growl rippled through my warriors, that an enemy's daughter should stand dripping on our shale and speak so plainly. I lifted one hand and the growl died. "Your name," I said. "Liara," she answered, "of Thornmere, though I suppose I am of nowhere now." She said it without pity, as a plain fact of the morning, and it landed in me strangely, because it was true, and because she had understood it before I had. Her own pack had given her away to end a war. Mine would never take her as its own. She had crossed a river into a country that would tolerate her and never love her, and she had known that before her boots touched the water, and she had come anyway. Do not, I told myself, do not make the mistake of admiring the enemy's gift. I turned and led her up the bank, and the peace was made in the old cold way, no feast, no song, only the 2 alpha seals pressed into wax on either shore, and a marriage spoken over the ford so that both packs might witness it and neither might later cry falsehood. I took her hand to speak the binding words and found it icy from the river, and without deciding to I closed both of mine around it to warm it, and felt her go still at the touch the way I had gone still at her scent, and neither of us looked at the other while the words were said. When it was done, Thornmere's warriors turned and climbed their own bank and were gone into the southern pines, and the ford lay empty between the 2 packs as it had lain for 100 years, and I walked my new wife up into a hold full of people who wanted her dead. They gave her the cold rooms above the east wall, far from the great hall, far from me, walls that had housed hostages before her. Havard arranged it, and I let him, because a part of me still wanted the river between us even under my own roof. "She'll want watching," he told me that first night, pouring the dark ale himself. "A Thornmere wolf under our roof, walking our halls, learning our gates and our watch changes. My lord, forgive an old warrior's caution, but you have wed a spy and called it peace." "I have wed a peace and you would like to call it a spy," I said. "It suits you, the war, it always has." He laughed as though I'd made a jest, but his eyes did not laugh. Havard had grown rich on the war, the raids, the reprisals, the endless border levies raised to keep the Vale armed. Peace was thin gruel to a man who had fed a lifetime on conflict. I knew that about him. I had not yet understood how far it went. "Watch her if it pleases you," I said. "But she is my wife, and she is under my protection, and the first wolf who forgets that will answer to me and not to you." "Of course, my lord," he said, and bowed, and I did not see the thought move behind his eyes because I was not yet looking for it. I did not go to her that night nor the next. I told myself it was politics, that a peace marriage is a treaty and not a courtship, that I owed the enemy's daughter a roof and my name and nothing else. The truth was that I was afraid of the quiet she put in me. A king cannot afford to go still when the wind turns. Stillness is how you die at a ford. So I kept my distance, and I watched her from it, the way you watch whether you don't trust. And what I watched was this. A woman given to her enemies, housed in cold rooms, served her meals last and coldest by servants who spat in the passage after they left her door, and she did not rage, and she did not weep, and she did not send word across the river begging her father to bring her home. She rose early. She learned the names of the scullery wolves no one else troubled to name. She found the hold's old healer, a half-blind crone named Saradwin whom my court had long left to rot in the lower rooms, and she sat with her, and she learned where our stores of dried moonwort were kept, and within a fortnight she was tending the sick of a pack that hated her. The first time I heard of it, I did not believe it. A boy took a fever in the low barracks, my steward told me, uneasy, as though reporting a thing he could not quite square. The kind that killed 4 last spring. The queen, he stumbled on the word, for none of us yet knew what to call her. The Thornmere woman sat with him 3 nights, cooled him, dosed him, sang to him when he raved. He woke this morning and knew his own mother. He paused. "Sire, the boy is the son of Aldous. Aldous who lost his brother to a Thornmere spear at the Redford." I went that night. I told myself it was to see the sick room, to judge whether I had a healer or a poisoner under my roof. That was a lie too. I went because I could not stay away. I found her in the low barracks, kneeling by a truckle bed, wringing a cloth in a basin of cold water. The boy slept. His father, Aldous, a hard wolf who had cursed her name to my face a fortnight past, sat slumped against the wall, undone with relief, watching her hands. She did not hear me in the doorway. She was singing, very low, an old song, and I knew it. That was the strange thing. I knew the tune from my own childhood, though the words she sang were the Thornmere words and not ours. The same song, sung on both banks of the river for 100 years of war, and neither pack had ever known the other still sang it. Something turned over in my chest and did not turn back. "You know that song," I said, and she started and looked up, and for the first time since the ford I saw her steadiness slip, not fear, but the bare surprise of being seen. "My mother sang it," she said. "All the mothers sing it on our side." "On ours as well," I told her. "The same tune, different words." She was quiet a moment. Then, "That should not be possible. We have hated each other for 100 years." "I know," I said. We looked at each other across the sleeping boy, and neither of us said the thing that sat there plainly in the room, that 2 packs who sang the same lullaby to their children could not always have been enemies, that the war had a beginning, and that a thing with a beginning can be given an end. I left before I could say something I would not be able to take back, but I stopped in the doorway. "Thank you," I said, "for the boy." He was afraid, she said simply. No one should be alone when they're afraid. And she turned back to her basin and wrung the cloth, and I went out into the cold hall with my heart doing something it had no leave to do. The rage should have stopped. That was the whole of the piece. The marriage bound our two alpha seals, and a bound seal means the border sleeps. For 3 weeks it did. Then Iron Hello scouts came in off the South Fords with their throats opened, and Thornmere's mark carved into the mud beside them. I stood over the bodies in the gray dawn, and my warriors stood behind me, and I could feel the war rising back up through them like water through cracked ice. I warned you, Havard said, and this time there was no oil in it, only the cold of a man who had been proven right and meant to spend it. A Thornmere seal on the wax and a Thornmere blade in our scouts within a month. They never meant the peace, my lord. They meant to put a spy in your hall and a knife in your back, and they have done both. Bring me her. Aldous, of all wolves, the father of the boy she'd saved, his grief for the boy already curdling back into the older grief, the brother lost at Redford. Bring me the Thornmere woman and let her answer for her pack's mark on our dead. The barracks growled agreement. 100 years does not unlearn in 3 weeks. I felt the whole hold tilting back toward the war, and I felt, sick and sudden, how easy it would be to let it, to give them the enemy's daughter, to let the old hate have its old shape, to be the war king they wanted, and not the strange, still thing she had made me. No one touches her, I said, and my voice went out over them flat and final. She has not left this hold in 3 weeks. She has not sent a bird across the river. Whatever cut our scouts, it was not her hand. Her hand or her father's, Aldous spat. It is all one blood. It is not, I said, and did not know until I said it how sure I was. Bring me the bodies inside, and bring me every wolf who found them. I will have the truth before I have the vengeance. That night I went to her rooms myself. She was awake, standing at the narrow window that looked south over the wall toward the river and the pines beyond it, toward home, though she would never again be welcome there any more than here. She turned when I came in and read my face and understood, I think, everything at once. They think it was us, she said. Our scouts are dead with your pack's mark beside them, I said. My warlord wants your head, half my hold wants it beside his, and I stand here at my own risk telling them it was not you. I watched her. So tell me, Leora of Thornmere, tell me true, on the old song your mother sang. Did your father ever mean this peace? Or did he give you to me the way you throw a stone to see how deep the water is? She did not flinch from it. She never flinched. My father is a hard man and a proud one, and he has spilled a great deal of your blood and grieved none of it, she said. But he is not a fool. He gave me to end a war he could no longer win. Thornmere is smaller than you and hungrier, and another winter of this would have starved us. He gave me because peace bought him time to feed his people. He would not throw that away to knife 6 of your scouts. There is nothing in it for him. He gains nothing. He loses everything. She stepped toward me, earnest now, the steadiness burning into something fiercer. Varric, listen to me. Ask the question your warlord does not want you to ask. Not who did it. Ask who profits. The word landed in me like a stone into a still pool. Who profits? Not Thornmere, starving and outnumbered, who had traded their alpha's daughter for a breathing space. Not me, who had spent 100 years wanting exactly this quiet. Who, in all the sundered veil, grew fat on the war and thin on the peace. Who had counseled me from the first hour to distrust her, to house her cold, to watch her, to make of her the very knife he was now so eager to say she was. I stood very still. Say nothing of this, I told her low, to anyone. You go on as you have, the healer, the sick, the low rooms. You give them no reason, and you watch and you tell me and me only. Do you understand? I understand, she said, and then softer, the first crack in her own iron. You believe me. I believe the arithmetic, I said, and I believe the song. I did not say the third thing, that I believed her, plainly in the marrow, the way my wolf had believed her at the ford before I had one reason to. I did not have words yet for that, and I was still fool enough to think I could keep from finding them. We found it together over the next moons, in the small hours when the hold slept. She was clever in a way my war court was not, patient, watchful, unafraid to sit in a cold passage for hours to learn who came and went. She marked which storehouses were tallied short. She marked that the scouts who died were always the ones loyal to my own crown and never Havard's men. She marked that the Thornmere marks carved beside our dead were carved wrong. The true Thornmere sign turned Widdershins, sunwise, a thing a Thornmere-born wolf would never do. Only an iron hello hand, copying an enemy's mark it had seen but never made, would carve it backward. And I learned things, too, in those small hours. I learned the low, warm sound of her laugh when it finally came, months in. I learned that she took her tea bitter and her bread burnt black at the edge and had no patience for soft things. I learned that, when she was thinking hard, she pressed the heel of her hand to her breastbone, as though the thought lived there. I learned the shape of her sleeping when she'd finally dropped off over the tally scrolls at my war table, and that I could not make myself wake her, and that I sat guarding a Thornmere woman's sleep through the darkest watch of the night like it was the most natural thing a king had ever done. One such night she woke to find me watching her, and did not startle, only looked at me a long moment in the low light. "You keep me at the far cold end of your hold," she said, "and then you sit up all night at my shoulder. You are a contradiction, Alpha King." "I put you there when I thought you were the war," I said. "I have not moved you because I no longer know where I would dare to put you." She smiled, faintly tired. "You could try beside you," she said, and then looked as surprised as I felt that she had said it, and neither of us moved, and the fire cracked, and something in that cold war room went very warm and very quiet. I did not reach for her. This is the part I hold to, that I did not, though my whole body wanted to, because she had been handed to me across a river as a debt to be paid, and I would not be one more man who took a thing from her she had not freely given. She had been given by her father, given by her pack, given by the war. I wanted, more than I had ever wanted the veil itself, to be the one thing in her life she was not given to but chose. "When this is finished," I said, my voice rougher than I meant, "and it is safe and you are free, then, if you would have it, we will speak of where you sit." She looked at me for a long time. "I will hold you to that," she said. Havard sprang his trap at the turning of the year, at the great gather feast when both packs, by the terms of the peace, were to meet at the ford under truce to renew the seals. He had built it well. I will grant the old wolf that. He meant to have Leora killed at the ford itself, in the open, before the eyes of both packs, struck down by a hidden Thornmere-marked blade, so that it would look to all Ironhollow as if her own people had reached across the water to murder her rather than let her live as our queen, and look to all Thornmere as if we had slain their Alpha's daughter under a flag of truce. Either reading meant the same thing. War, instant and total, and Havard's own men already positioned to fall on the leaderless moment and take the veil in the confusion. 100 years of hate needed only a spark, and he had spent a lifetime learning exactly where to strike it. He did not know that we knew. He did not know that a Thornmere woman had counted his short storehouses and read his backward marks, and that her enemy husband had believed her. We let him build it. We let him move his knifemen into place at the ford, and we prepared, quietly, our own answer, not an army, which would have been only more war, but the truth, laid bare in the one place both packs would have to witness it. The morning of the gather came gray and still, as the morning of her crossing had been. Both packs stood along their own banks, Thornmere in the South Pines, Ironhollow on the northern shale, and between them the ford ran cold. Her father stood on the far shore, hard-faced, and I stood on mine, and Leora walked down to the water at my side in a gown the color of river stone, and I could feel Havard's readiness at my shoulder like heat off a forge. "My lord," he murmured, "let her go first to the middle stone to renew the seal where both packs can see. It is the proper form." The middle stone, where his knifemen had their killing lines, where a body would fall into the sight of 400 wolves. It is the proper form, I agreed, but not today. And I stepped down into the ford myself, ahead of her, and lifted my voice so that it went out over both banks, north and south, the way a thing said at the middle of the river reaches every ear on either shore. 100 years we have bled in this vale, I called, ford by ford, son by son, and when at last 2 alphas sealed a peace and sent their own blood across the water to bind it, the killing did not stop. Our scouts died with Thornmir's mark beside them. Thornmir will tell you their raiders died with ours. I saw her father's head come up sharp across the water. Both packs have been told the other broke faith. Both packs have reached again for the old hate. And one wolf in this vale has grown fat on every year of it, and stood to grow fatter on the day it began again. I turned. Havard, come down to the water and answer for the marks your men carved backward. He did not run. I will grant him that too. He knew in the half-breath before he moved that it was finished, and rather than be judged he chose to make his lie true in the one stroke he had left. He had built the whole trap around one death, and if he could not have it quiet he would have it loud. He drew and lunged, not at me, at her, at Leora, to put a blade in the peace bride before both packs and let the war he needed be born of it after all. I was already turning, but I was a half-step too far, out in the ford, and he was fast, and I saw with a sick certainty that I would not reach her in time. And I did not have to, because she did not run from him. She stepped past me, toward the middle stone, and laid her open hand flat upon it. I had not known what the stone was. None of us living had. It was only the old gray marker at the heart of the ford, worn smooth, that had stood between the 2 packs longer than either could remember, older than the war, older than the split, set there in a time none of us had a name for. The Covenant Stone, the oldest wolves called it when they called it anything, and thought it only a border mark. Leora laid her hand on it, and it woke. Light came up out of the stone, not fire, but a deep silver-white glow like moonlight risen from inside the rock, and it ran up her arm and stood her hair from her shoulders, and lit the whole ford in a light that made every wolf on both banks fall silent at once. The river went to silver, and in that light Havard's lunging blade turned in his hand as though the very air had thickened against it, and he staggered, and could not close the last stride to her, and stood there straining against nothing while 400 wolves watched the stone name her. Because that is what it did. I understood it in the moment it happened, the way you understand a thing your blood has always known. The Covenant Stone had been set at the making of the Vale, in the days before there were 2 packs, when there was one people, one line, one blood, and one pact sworn on that stone that whosoever carried the first blood might bind the Vale to peace, and none could gainsay it. The line had thinned and scattered and been forgotten in 100 years of war. And it had come back across the ford in a plain gray cloak, given as a hostage, dismissed as a pawn, housed in the cold rooms, the last daughter of the first pact, and neither pack had known what they held. Her father knew it now. I saw him go to one knee on the far bank, and his warriors with him, not to me and not to her, but to the light and the old blood in it. And my own pack, Aldous first, the hard wolf whose son she'd saved, went down to one knee on the northern shale, and the kneeling ran back through both packs like wind through wheat, north and south, until the whole sundered vale knelt to the woman standing in the light at the middle of the ford with her enemy's crown on her marriage and her own blood, answering the oldest stone in the world. Only Havard stood straining undone. "You carved the marks backward," Leora said to him, and her voice in the silver light carried to both banks without her raising it. "Sunwise, no Thornmere hand makes them so. You murdered your own king's scouts to keep a war that fed you, and you would have murdered me to start it again." She lowered her hand from the stone, and the light gentled but did not leave her, and she looked at him without hate, which was worse than hate. "Both packs have heard it now. There is no war left for you to hide behind." I took him. I did not kill him at the ford. A killing at the ford was the very thing he'd hungered for, and I would not give the peace that stain. I took his blade and his rank and his men, and I gave him to the judgment of both alphas together, which was the first thing our two packs had ever done together in 100 years, and there is a kind of justice in that I still think on. Then I turned, out in the cold silver water, to my wife. "I told you," I said, and my voice would not stay steady, "that when it was finished and you were free, we would speak of where you sit." "I remember," she said. "You are free," I said. "Your blood binds this veil. No wolf on either bank can command you now, not your father, not me, not any king. You are the freest soul in this valley." I went down, then, Alpha King of Iron Hello, in the middle of the ford before both packs still kneeling. I went down on one knee in the cold running water and looked up at her. "So I do not command, I ask. Not the peace bride, not the hostage, not the debt paid across a river. I ask Liara, who sang to a frightened boy who was not hers, who counted the storehouses no one would count, who laid her hand on the oldest stone in the world and ended my grandfather's war. I ask you to choose. Stay or go. And if you stay, stay beside me because you will it, and for no other reason under the moon." The silver light stood soft on the water around us. On both banks, 400 wolves held their breath. She reached down and took my cold hand in both of hers and warmed it, the way I had warmed hers at this same ford a year before, and she smiled the tired, fierce smile I had learned in the long nights over the tally scrolls. "I chose the moment I turned to the stone instead of running," she said. "Get up out of the river, Varric. Your knees are old and the water is cold, and I have decided where I will sit, and it is beside you, and it will take a great many mornings to say everything I mean to say to you, so we had best begin." I got up out of the river, and I did not make her a queen with a crown and a coronation stamp, though she became one, and I did not vow before the packs to burn the world for her, though I would have. I only walked her up my own bank with her hand in mine, past Aldous who bowed his head to her now, past the cold east room she would never sleep in again, and the ford lay open behind us, truly open, for the first time in 100 years, so that by spring the children of both packs were crossing it freely to play in the shallows where their fathers had died, singing the one lullaby both banks had always shared without ever knowing it. Long after, on the nights the old war tries to walk through my dreams, I wake and find her breathing beside me, and I remember her at the middle of the river with the light coming up through her, and I remember what she said to a frightened boy in a barracks when she still thought no one would ever love her here. No one should be alone when they're afraid. She never is. I have seen to that, and I will see to it every dawn I am given, not because a treaty binds me, not because a stone named her, but because a woman I was handed as a debt crossed a river into a hall full of enemies, and taught the hardest king in the vale that the drum behind his ribs had only ever been waiting to go still for her. That is the whole of it. That is how the 100-year war ended, not with an army but with a woman who would not run, and a king who finally stopped fighting.